Warning! This video contains spoilers for the following game, Dishonored.
Hello and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Dianka and I'm here with
Wokeg
and
Callum.
We're going to be talking about Dishonored and more specifically the characterization of Dishonored. Okay, the first character we're going to start off talking about is Corvo. As the main character, personally for me, Corvo is a bit of a boring character because he doesn't seem to progress in any meaningful sense through the story. I mean, at the beginning, Emily is really close to him. And yet in high chaos runs, Emily ends up basically terrified of the guy. But that makes sense. But in lower chaos runs, he's just the same guy at the end. He just happens to have killed his way through half the city.
You know, I think the interesting thing is Emily isn't terrified of him in high chaos. She's worse. She's intrigued. The worst ending to my mind is the one you get in middle chaos, where Emily hasn't been driven sort of completely over the brink by what she's seen and what she's seen Corvo do. But what's the outsider's line? The outsider says something about how Corvo may be dead years from now, but Emily will always remember him and always remember what he's done. The implication being that while she's not gone totally insane, you've darkened her worldview just enough that she
turns into a military dictator, doesn't she?
Well, it's not outright said so. I mean, so in high chaos, it's kind of it's implied that she goes a little bit off the deep end. In medium chaos, it's implied that she's just sort of a bit of a harsh ruler, and quite possibly that she's having other people assassinated.
Oh.
But the interesting thing about Corvo as a character is that he's almost entirely ludic. Now, most of the other characters in the game they're narrative based. They say what they're thinking and feeling, their actions bear out their words, but not through gameplay really, just through cutscenes and dialogue. Corvo has a character, but that character is determined by the way the player plays him and the motivations of the player for playing him.
Okay, so I feel we finished up Corvo, didn't we? So what do people think about the Empress and Emily?
I think it was a good idea to have the Empress be the voice of the heart. We get to see a little bit of what she was like. She seems quite genuinely caring towards the Empire.
Several of the comments do seem to suggest that she is quite caring toward the Empire. Although several of them are mostly just, why have you brought me to this place? I don't like it here. Fuck that guy.
Well, those are pretty understandable comments to be made. Also, I've been thinking recently, with the Empress... Okay, now, bear with me here, but her being assassinated, was it necessarily a bad thing? I mean, if you look at it, yes, it's Burrows' fault that they have the plague at all, but after the plague is around and it's slowly starting to wipe out the city to the extent that she sent her bodyguard away for 3 months, it's become pretty clear that she's unwilling to impose any kind of quarantines on people. Yes, the city gets through the plague with Burrows in charge if Corvo doesn't spread chaos. If everyone maintains faith in the system, the order holds up. But if the Empress had stayed alive after the plague had already been unleashed, does it not seem like there's a pretty decent chance everything would have just gone completely to hell? I mean, I'm not saying that Burrows should get away with having a ridiculously horrible military rule, or that everything the Watch does under him was valid, but...
You're basically saying that she was too soft a ruler.
For the circumstance, it seems like after the plague has been unleashed, she wasn't really going to do the city any good. That, yeah, she cared about her people, but she wasn't necessarily very pragmatic. We also know she's only been ruling for a short time. She's not necessarily a very tested ruler.
I'd agree with that. I mean, the Empress is not really much of a character. It's not a character that makes much of an impression on the overall story. I mean, obviously there's the heart, but the Empress herself just kind of dies.
Emily is a character I think is interesting because of what she says about Corvo. She's not particularly well explored in and of herself. She's not really got that much going on for her. She's more just there to flesh him out, really. I suppose it's a little bit harsh because it's not like she has no identity, but Corvo's identity is so... subtle's the wrong word for it. but muted, perhaps. It's definitely there, but because it's shaped by the player's actions, we need to be able to see a reflection of it rather than see it directly. Not having Corvo speak, not really seeing him by his face very often, these things make it harder to identify him. So having Emily's character be responsive to his adds that extra little dimension. It gives us a little bit more to play with him, basically. She's fun because she is very much supposed to represent innocence, even if it's, a fairly undeserved innocence, being an Empress / the heir of an Empress. She's in all white for most of the game, and even though 2 out of 3 of the endings imply that she grows up to become someone horrible, she always starts out from that position of innocence. So she's the sort of greatest example of how the morality system in the game isn't about what's good or what's evil, as evidenced by the fact that several of the low chaos endings are in many ways low chaos assassinations are in many ways much less preferable to a quick death, even if it's a brutal one. The fact that Emily mirrors Corvo's actions is supposed to hint to the player that Corvo's actions will be mirrored by the city. So the fact that we can see that high chaos makes things more chaotic just by virtue of the fact that he's spreading panic and alarm, being less a surgical strike and more of a proper menace, a real shadow in the night. The fact that you can see Emily's transformation as she goes from this innocent to someone who's at first scared and abused, or feels like she might be being abused. She grows into someone who's increasingly revenge-driven herself. She becomes more focused on the idea of people dying.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Emily's a bit of a Arya Stark character. She doesn't really want to... She doesn't really want to follow the trappings of royalty. She doesn't really want to be just a passive ruler. She wants to be someone who's active and out there. And that's certainly shaped by her experiences and by Corvo himself. So he has an absolutely profound impact on her.
It just serves to try and make the player think a little bit more. Right, so, the Outsider, why he works as a Satan analogue is that he's not been anthropomorphized. So he's legitimately outside the human experience. Traditional Satans, what usually happens is they're portrayed as
a fundamental part of the world.
Well,
they're like very, very in the events. They're very tied towards them.
Divine traditional Satan, though.
Well, you've got your Christian Satan, you've got your Disney Satan.
I always got the feeling that he was more like a Lovecraft figure than like a direct Satan thing.
That's the one I got, is that he's just an entity from beyond. You don't know, he doesn't really have any... in to humanity. He doesn't really understand them properly.
He understands them perfectly, and he's not he's not invested in them, but he is occasionally interested in them. He's not Lovecraftian because he's not entirely outside the scope or scale of the universe, and he's capable of recognizing humanity and inflicting subtle cruelties on them, but not necessarily doing it out of spite or malice or even disinterest, but just casual interest. So the reason I classify him as genuinely insidious is because he's legitimately able to trick Corvo into behaving in an interesting and entertaining way that also accomplishes exactly the outcome he wants, just by giving him a few measly supernatural powers. It's
I'd say the main character motivation of him is that he's bored.
That he doesn't indicate that he's bored, just that sometimes he finds things interesting.
So the things he finds interesting are very different to what you kind of imagine them to be. Sokolov has invented all these things, and yet he doesn't really find him interesting at all.
That's because Sokolov has no romantic potential. There's nothing that can happen with Sokolov particularly, other than he invents more brilliant things. The beautiful thing with Corvo is not that he's important, not that he stands a chance, but the destruction that he could cause if he doesn't think things through properly. The chaos he can have on the rest of the city if he just lets his passions run away without even knowing it. Just given the right tools, the sheer force of destruction that he can be. It's all about that sort of tiny little nudge the outsider can give to destroy everything. That's why he's insidious. That's why he works.
He gives powers to people who are going to make the most chaos. And that's actually why he's surprised at Corvo in the low chaos ending. Is that he expected Corvo to go high chaos and basically burn the city down.
What was I going to say? But then he strikes me as not necessarily a force for evil always.
I don't think it's evil that he wants. I think he wants because he thinks that the order of the world is boring. So chaos is the key.
But then that's what I was going to say. So if the world was chaotic, it strikes me that he, I could see him giving powers to someone who was going to go on a epic quest to forge people into a nation. Not necessarily for the good of the people in that nation, but just because he'd want to see if they could succeed, if they could chance the odds and change fate. He seems like that kind of an agent of change, not necessarily change for the good, for the bad, for order, for chaos, for anything, just sometimes to see if it can be changed.
Anton Sokolov.
Yes, Sokolov. He's basically Rasputin crossed with Da Vinci.
Pretty much. Even in concept, they called him the Da Vinci of Dunwall.
Yeah, he's quite clearly an XP of both Da Vinci and Rasputin.
Pretty much.
Well, he's not knocking off the Empress.
Along with they said like it was a combination of Rasputin, Da Vinci, and Rockefeller, which was a bit of a weird third element to throw in.
Who the hell is Rockefeller?
Rockefeller was the first billionaire in history. He was basically the oil baron of oil barons. Mr. John D. Rockefeller.
Not really seeing how Sokolov is supposed to be Rockefeller.
It's basically he became rich based on like the oil industry. I don't see it either, to be honest.
I think that's a very tenuous connection.
Yeah, I was going to say, because all of Sokolov's inventions seem to be pretty clearly state-owned. It says, I do my duty for the realm, but not gladly. AKA,
yeah.
I do this because they will shoot me if I do not, and also I love doing it, but I don't get any of the rewards of doing it.
Pretty much.
Well, depending on how you define rewards, I suppose.
Sokolov really hates his place in society.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, he hates the nobility, pretty much. He hates, like, the pretentiousness of it. So, he's loved by everyone, but he hates everyone. He'd just rather be left alone in a room to work on his inventions.
With an endless supply of human test subjects.
Pretty much, yeah.
Gotta have those endless supplies.
Nobody worth killing around here.
Have any of you guys seen Gangs of New York?
Yes, he is very clearly Bill the Butcher.
He is Bill the Butcher.
Slackjaw is actually probably one of the most honest characters in the series. And that he makes no bones about the fact he is an absolute bastard to other people, in that he's selling them fake plague cure. But he also makes no bones about the fact that the other people around are much worse.
It's not fake, it's watered down.
It works on you.
This is also true, it's real as far as you're concerned. It's watered down, but he's not just selling them, he's not snake oiling them.
Yeah, he's helping people. Ish. He's turning a profit from it, definitely. But he's...
Like I say, he makes no bones about the fact that there are far worse people than him.
Yeah, definitely.
Granny Rags.
Granny Rags.
Grindy Rags.
Ooh, Granny Rags.
Few people who are worse than her.
Nobody, basically.
Probably not, no.
I mean, I was kind of tempted to... Because I had been... Obviously, I did the High Chaos playthrough, so I was killing everything and anything that moved. And I was very annoyed that you couldn't kill Granny Rags when you first meet her.
Can you not?
No.
Is that you?
I think you can, but then she just disappears.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like, she just... You can kill her, that goes through death animation, and then just the body just vanishes. It's like, oh.
Who's that?
Yeah, the whole supernatural shit's going on.
It's implied that's just a copy.
Let Granny Rags tell you.
In any case, Granny Rags.
It won't cost
Granny Rags. She loves, she has a fascination with birds.
three of the great cities
She's speaking to rats, but she refers to them as birds.
Yeah, I think that's probably a
Empress
It's probably just a front that she's putting on this. She's still pretending to be, lovable old Granny Rags. That poor, sweet old woman who lives all on her own in the middle of that horrible district. Oh, we should take care of her.
Where does the cannibalism angle come from? I swear that's like 1 minute she's just sort of crazy and evil, and the next minute she's eating Slackjaw.
I think it's a youth thing, isn't it?
Is it? Because Slackjaw's like mid-40s.
No, it's a youth thing where if she bathes in blood, then she gets...
She's cooking him.
Yeah.
She's making him into stew.
Well, it's either that or because she got her powers when she went to the other continent, so could be some cannibalism involved there that gave her powers, and then she brought it over.
She might be doing a ritual.
So it's a non-European inspired feral continent. Everyone must be cannibals.
No,
Callum.
Maybe it's...
I'm disgusted.
I'm saying maybe if there was a ritual that did involve cannibalism, then perhaps she's redoing the ritual to refresh her powers. You don't know, but it does kind of come out of left field. It's like, oh, that's a thing.
Yeah, suddenly you're eating people. Well, I mean, I got outside of powers and killed a bunch of people, but you don't see me gnawing on any of them now, do you?
It's like, well, even in High Chaos, for me, that was like... Wow, I mean, I'm a dick, but come on.
I was going to say I didn't knock out a maid and then bury her beneath a mountain of corpses, but at least I didn't nibble on her.
No, she's definitely more of a straight up witch.
Oh yeah,
than
definitely.
The other branded characters. I mean, she's got like runes that are just placed around the place as well.
Yeah, she seems very Corvo seems, to be honest, largely indifferent to the outsider visiting him. He's been given the powers, but then he's going off and doing his own personal mission his way. Daud seems to more hate the outsider for turning him into, giving him the powers which have turned him into...
Daud seems to hate it, but he's addicted to it all the same.
Whereas Granny Rags is full on worship the outsider, let's eat people mode.
There's just the total ramping up of Granny Rags' character. I'm an agent, bitch!
Well, her lair is it's beneath beneath a whale processing factory, isn't it?
Yeah. It's almost showing that she's gone... The cannibalism thing could just be she's gone very off the deep end in terms of leaving humanity behind, which is kind of what happened to you with outsider powers, because she can dissolve into rats, blah blah blah. But she's also got she's got the cameo. So she might have just gone a bit crazy.
That's just it's a phylactery event. Effectively,
yeah, it's a phylactery.
She's a leech.
Yeah. I mean, she's extremely well versed in her powers, a lot more than Corvo or even Daud, who still seems like a novice compared to her.
Oh yeah.
She understands it a lot better than they do.
Yeah. Well, she's been doing it for a lot longer.
Wanna know something funny? When we were kids, we were all scared of Granny Rags. Thought she was a terrible witch. Then we grew up and figured she was just a sad old lady. We were right the first time. Now ain't that funny?
In the same vein as Granny Rags, you've also got Daud, who is more developed than Granny Rags, but still represents a sort of reflection of what Corvo could become. I mean, personally I thought Daud was quite an interesting character, because he's clearly got a lot of motivations, and he's quite well rounded as a character, but I don't know what you guys feel.
He's a brilliant character. He's very well developed. He's just the sheer sense of regret that you get from him, and yet he's an addict basically. He's
I'd say that's a very good
addicted
analogy,
to he's addicted to the power that he uses, and he sees himself as having no other purpose in life, and he hates it.
Yeah, doesn't he? He makes the comment once that he's rotted from the inside.
Yeah, definitely.
Does anyone else think he looks a bit like Hugo Weaving?
He does look a bit like
He does look a bit like Hugo Weaving.
I think the addict point with Daud is a very good one to make, because as shown after he kills the Empress, he does know what he does is wrong, and he wants to stop and he wants to go back, but he doesn't know if he can.
Yeah, and he tries to test himself against Corvo as well. He needs to feel validated when they have their duel. He needs to feel validated as being as really just having a purpose, making sure that what he did was worth something.
I think that's a very good thing to take away from that. He's a mirror for Corvo. There's the paintings that Emily does of Corvo, where it's what she wants Corvo to be. And then there's Daud. I'm talking low chaos here. There's the Corvo that Emily draws, where he's heroic and does greatly, or he could become Daud.
I think that's his most interesting trait, is the fact that he's tragic, but the only one who appreciates his own tragedy is him.
He's a man who knows he could have turned back and knows he should have turned back.
He probably knows that he still could turn back, but he's so far into it that he just can't.
Until after he's killed the Empress.
Okay, Havelock, Admiral Havelock.
I suppose the weird thing about him is the heart tells you that he's a power-grabbing traitor really early on, and everyone's all like, nah, I'm sure he's better now.
Yeah. It doesn't ever come up that you think this guy might stab you in the back, and then...
Well, I mean, like, once or twice...
But sometimes, good men have to do bad things to make the world right.
I started thinking, he might do that. But then, I guess, the problem is I'm really gullible with games and game endings. I never see these things coming. Callum, you're usually quite good with this. What was your thing? I mean, right on the last mission I got it, but before that, did you see it coming any earlier?
Yeah, I did. Simply because of the amount of game time. When we went after not High Overseer, the Spy Master, I thought we haven't really gone through much of the game so far, or we're not coming towards the end of the game. I'm not getting that feeling. So a betrayal's coming up. That's going to set us back to square one. I thought it was going to be Pendleton that betrayed everyone else.
I didn't see all at once.
I didn't see Havelock do it. In fact, I didn't see any of the loyalists betraying Corvo in as such, as I thought that they'd sweep into power with Hiram Burrows, and then they'd all be, and it would dissolve into civil war over who would look after Emily.
Havelock certainly seems to be. For one thing, he certainly seems to have hated the nobility. When you see him, he certainly seems like he's come from a less well-off, middle class, possibly poor family, who's raised through the ranks, and now he's admiral. He can't raise any higher, so he's frustrated because he's a competent soldier, and by sheer luck of birth, the others, Campbell and Burrows, who were incompetent, corrupt, treacherous, weak-willed, and cowardly, and yet they've just cruised on into their positions. So he's got a lot of resentment in him.
Yeah, I see that. He's frustrated against the confines of the social system.
Doesn't he kill his brother?
Havelock?
Yeah.
No, I believe that's Pendleton who kills his brother.
No, Pendleton has you kill his brothers.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Havelock shoots it. I want to say he shoots his brother.
I don't know.
It's one of the secrets that the Heart has about. The Heart really reveals from like the first day if you use it on him that Havelock is a complete and utter bastard. I mean, he presents himself as totally noble to you and just a loyalist. Describing themselves. Do they describe themselves as the loyalist conspiracy? Or
they do describe themselves as the loyalist conspiracy. Yes.
Ah. Well, at any rate, the Heart says from the first day, the first time, I'm not sure if it's the first, because it's random, isn't it? But from the first day you can find out that the reason he's there is because he attempted to launch a coup against the government and failed. He's already tried to take them over with the Navy by military force of arms, and it hasn't worked.
So now he's going to try this?
Yeah, basically. You're his plan B.
He happens to have fallen in with a group who are trying to take over the government for a much better reason, but he's going to fall in with this group.
Is it for a better reason?
Well,
I mean, he's the leader of the conspiracy. He puts it together. Is it that that it's for a better reason, or is it that
at least the other two have at least initially more high-minded reasons?
Well, what are Pendleton and Teague's reasons?
Well,
I don't recall specifically why they joined.
Talk about Teague. Callum?
He was someone who had a lot of potential, and a lot of people kind of allude to things about him. Like there's this weird thing that goes on throughout the game where everyone calls him a snake.
Yeah, and then I know he betrays Corvo at the end.
He betrays him at the end, but so does everyone else, and he doesn't really have that much of a conniving personality. He doesn't really have much of a personality at all.
He's just kind of there.
Like, when you first introduced to him, he's quite quick-witted and snarky and things, but when you talk to him any time after that, he just relays information to you, or he's just sort of pandering to Havelock a lot. He doesn't really seem to have much of his own agenda, and yet we're supposed to believe that he does.
Isn't he the only one who shows some kind of contrition at the end as
No,
well?
that's Pendleton.
No, that's Pendleton.
Pendleton doesn't say sorry or anything. Pendleton's really bitter and pissed off that he got shot.
Depends on the ending. He's very. You get a sense that he's very.
Pendleton's vaguely sorry he killed his brothers, but he's not sorry about Corvo. Martin seems to hate what he's... because he goes on about how it just became easier to kill and betray. After they'd ordered one, they just couldn't stop. Yeah, Martin, I swear, because he...
Now, when you talk to... going back to Pendleton, when you talk to Wallace, he starts talking about Pendleton and how he was reluctant and things to do what he did.
Yeah, Wallace is a bit of a shame for Pendleton. I mean, Pendleton regrets betraying people, but only the people who he liked. He doesn't really care about Corvo or any of the other people they killed. Teague Martin gets vaguely, like, he's disgusted with himself at the fact that they betrayed Corvo.
Martin kills himself at the end because committing evil acts to attain power becomes a habit.
He's very witty, he's very cocky, and he's completely not what you expect from an overseer. But then it's kind of lost throughout the game. We don't see his personality come out anywhere near as much as we did in the first few sequences.
The final of the loyalists then, Trevor Pendleton. He seems to be a mixed bag, really. I mean, he's got high-reaching ideals, it seems, but then obviously he does some very, very, very dark things.
So Pendleton seems like of all the goals of the loyalists, his goal seems to have been just to return to stability with the nobility in power, preferably with him higher up in the nobility, though he doesn't seem to want to lead them by any means.
He wants to be the power behind the throne.
Yeah, definitely. And he's happy returning to where he was and trying to get things back on track.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. I mean, Havelock wanting to restructure the society from the ground up, Martin wanting to change Martin wanting to put things back to the way they were, but better, and then Pendleton's in the middle, where he just wants things to return to normal.
Yeah, and I mean he's very explicit that he represents the interests of the nobility. He doesn't. If there was one thing that's Pendleton's redemption factor, it's the fact that he's unfailingly honest, despite his betrayal.
Yeah. So we go on to the rest of the loyalists. I'd say the most developed one is Samuel, obviously.
No, actually, I'd say Callista, definitely.
Callista?
I suppose Samuel as well, but Samuel's... I don't know, he's by far the most moral character in the game, definitely.
He's a reverse Charon.
Yeah.
Ferrying souls back from the dead.
Yeah, definitely.
Or rather, ferrying you to send souls to
you.
death.
He's mail order death. No, as much Samuel is likable, but there isn't really much to him. He's just a guy who sort of gets on with his job and doesn't really ask questions.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that was true. So you say Callista is the most interesting?
Yeah, definitely. So, from a general view, I think Callista's our main view, like our main personal view into how women are treated in Dishonored. Usually very downtrodden, aside from aside from when they rarely get into a place of high society. She's not suited to babysitting Emily at all. She's reluctant, definitely, but she has a bit of a character arc where initially she's very reserved, and then she feels very overwhelmed by what she's trying to do, which is trying to bring up a member of royalty without really having any of that teaching herself. She cares for Emily, but she still dislikes her job. She still feels like she's out of her depth, and she's often trying to tell the loyalists that they need to help her. Even with all the help that she's giving, there's nothing that they'll give back to her. And so I think that she's probably the most tragic character out of them all.
Moving on to the Spy Master.
Burrows, I think, is a particularly interesting character. There was the note we had when we were looking through the first level, that Burrows is the only character who really seems to go in for ostentatious dress in a city where everyone else seems to, even the known indulger of everything, High Overseer Campbell, Burrows, it seems to be the only one who really goes in for jewellery for the sake of showing how wealthy he is, or gold braid and trim on his clothing. He's a very self-assured man. He's got a scene in the prologue where he admits his plans to Corvo, totally unnecessarily, just because he is experiencing this huge crisis of self, where he's aware that everything that's happening is his fault. But he still needs to feel like he's the one with the answers. So even though his need to be right and to show himself to be right is what's put him in this situation to begin with, he's a terrible spy master by all accounts. He in no way does his job very well. So he unleashes this plague upon the city. Total cock up. Can't stop Daud or his men. Total cock up. I mean, when the thing that you're supposed to be there to stop is what you went. He was deathly afraid of the Empress sending anyone else in to start investigating the rat plague on the basis that
he can't fabricate evidence very well, so he'd get caught.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you're a spy master. You have one job. Hiding this should not have been hard. All the people in question are likely dead from plague.
Well, it's the point that you made earlier with the ostentatious clothing. The Lord Protector, the Imperial bodyguard, understated clothing, no fine trimmings. Because we do see Corvo in several paintings and stuff, and he's not wearing anything garish or anything like that. I mean, he's got a scary mask on in the posters, but he doesn't get that until post that. But the guy who you should expect to be radiating a sense of power through his clothes and, his weaponry, which you'd expect to be incredibly expensive.
Yeah, now you come to think about it, has his portrait painted by the most famous painter in the land, making it a major work of art. He's supposed to be a spy master. He's supposed to be acting in the shadows.
The figure in the shadows. Yeah. The one that no one who knows. You shouldn't even know what he looks like.
Ideally.
And he's just walking around in gold clothing. Well, gold braided clothing.
Aye. Well, he's got a bright red shirt on. Hangs his portrait on every wall.
But he's a good villain to have. His semi-accomplice in this, Thaddeus Campbell. He's a bit of an XP of the decadences of the church, isn't he?
I mean, you can say what you like about Burrows, but fundamentally, he was motivated by the desire to not die. Campbell is literally just making a power grab. Burrows thinks he knows best, and also doesn't want to be killed for treason.
Campbell is just...
It's
a
just
decadent
naked
hypocrite.
greed. Yeah, basically, total.
The irony being that he leads the organisation portraying the outsider as this demonic figure when he himself is essentially... I mean, when we go into his secret room, he's essentially Caligula. He's got all this art and opulent furnishings everywhere and prostitutes.
But then I suppose it is reflected in the different takedowns you could get for neutralising them. Campbell's is a lot harsher than Burrows is. I mean, Burrows, he might get lynched in prison, he might get tortured a bit, but it's unlikely. He's very likely just to get a public execution and know he's failed. It's humiliating, it's terrifying, and ultimately it will kill him. But it's not on the same scale as what happens to Campbell.
Oh, the brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty nasty. But obviously, kind of deserved it. Kind of a dick. Okay, I think we're all out of characters. Okay, so we've been talking about the characters in Dishonored so far. Overall, how do you think the characterization in this game was? Personally, for me, I thought it was quite well characterized. There were interesting, complex characters with actual arcs. We saw how they developed over time. It wasn't just stock, boring characters. Yourself?
I do, with some exceptions. I'd say I agree with you. I definitely like to see more of the characters have a few arcs to go through. Certainly, I think Joplin and Martin, they were two that had no real development. And in Martin's case, it was kind of, he had the signs of development which were dropped. So, in those cases, I think it was a bit of a missed opportunity. But overall, I'd say they did it quite well. What I would say about the characters, though, is I wish that their interaction had been better. You get a sense of who they are especially with the heart. And I think that was a very wise decision to put it in there. But their interactions with each other don't really seem to be. They're very static and they're not very believable.
I actually quite like a lot of the characterization in Dishonored. I know it's a fairly general statement to make, but when you think about it, a lot of it's quite purposefully done. The characters are well written, even if the dialogue isn't always. And even though, things like the guards have terrible audio barks, there's still something nice about well, not nice, but still something engaging about the city. I am not a huge steampunk fan, but I think that Dishonored did a very good job of building characters in an electropunk world that trades off of the player's assumed familiarity with steampunk. The characters themselves are sort of somewhat complex. It varies, obviously. There are different subtleties, different levels to things. There are interesting themes and motivations and interplay and politics in a lot of other games, but Dishonored is really one where the universe is cohesive. These things work together to actually build a much more comprehensive, a lot more engaging experience.
And you feel the blue day rising, hiding the sheets of